Okay, hi guys. It looks like it's just me, which I'm like thinking is such a fluke thing. Seriously, because I've had more than 10 of you sign up for this masterclass in particular, and I have more than 50 of you who have chosen to be signed up for my free masterclass mailing list. So I'm thinking everybody's busy feeding their kids dinner or something. I'm not sure, but it's okay. And I know that I promised you guys I would send you the free recorded replay of this masterclass if you weren't able to make the time and date. So I'm resuming as usual. I'm going to talk about these 4 phases. I have my little agenda written out, and I'm going to share my screen to kind of help with understanding these 4 phases. And then you guys can watch this as a replay and still get all of this information if you were hoping to get it, as well as more information about what it costs to work privately with me. So let's just dive right in to the 4 phases of your cycle. So basically, to start off, I'm going to kind of just give you an introduction. I'm going to tell you about what these 4 phases are and kind of what to expect from what I'm saying before I share my screen. So an average woman has a 28-day hormonal cycle, meaning that the entirety of a woman's hormones express themselves over the course of, on average, 28 days. Some women have shorter cycles and some women have longer cycles, but anything is normal from like 24 or 25-day cycles all the way out to like maybe 34 or 35-day cycles. 28 is like the middle normal range. So that's what we're going to go off of today. But just know when you look at like my images and you listen to me talking about cycle days and that type of thing, that this is slightly different for every woman. Every woman's fluctuations are just slightly different depending on the length of her entire cycle. I'll also kind of start by saying that men have a 24-hour hormonal cycle, meaning that a healthy average male would make all of his testosterone for the day while he sleeps at night. Wake up in the morning kind of like preloaded with that testosterone for the day. Use it as he goes through his work and whatever he has to do. And then at the end of the day would feel tired and depleted and kind of reach like a peak, kind of like what maybe we feel when we're getting ready to PMS or when we're on our period, like a peak of like being tired and depleted. But then he goes to sleep, rests during the night, and his cycle refreshes itself. This is what the whole entire like American structure as far as work and exercise and daily schedules and routines has been based off of is men's biology, because as we all know, we're still in the whole like, phase of understanding the real differences between men and women, and that when the workforce was created, it was predominantly men who were involved in it. Women weren't a huge part of the workforce at that point. So it makes sense that the system was created off of men's biology. I don't mean that as an insult at all, more just like now that we have this information of how differently our biology works as women, we can take a little bit more power and charge in our own lives to better manage our time and our energy when we realize that we're not the same as men. We're not the same every single day. And that's what we're really going to get into today, is how as women in reproductive years, we really are not the same every single day. And so what's good for us as far as food and exercise and how we exert ourselves changes every week with our hormones when we are naturally kind of like going through this cycle. So things like birth control or having hysterectomies or partial hysterectomies change the flow of these cycles. And this is valuable information for absolutely anybody, but know going into this information that to take it with a grain of salt, and know that for a better in-depth understanding of kind of what's happening in a woman's body if she's on birth control or if she does not have a reproductive monthly cycle, you would want to do a little bit more reading or work privately with somebody who has expertise in that area, like myself. So let's get into it. for reference, before we get into this, the way that I track cycles is the first day of your period. So the first day you experience bleeding, that is cycle day 1. So that's the first day of a new cycle as far as keeping track on a calendar. So know that when you hear me talking about cycle days. So I'm going to share my screen. Don't get overwhelmed when you see these little images and graphs, because you will understand it once we've talked about it. But right off the bat, it might look like a lot. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here so that I'm not looking at the bottom graph and we're just looking at the top one. Let's get my image out of the way over there. Scroll down here. Okay. So try to ignore my drawings down here. We'll talk about that in a minute. And what you can see right now is a diagram kind of showing you the ups and downs of these 3 main reproductive hormones that are going to affect the way you feel, the way you build muscle, and the way you burn fat. So these aren't the only hormones that are involved in your 28-day cycle, but these are the ones we're going to talk about today. So as you can see in my beautiful little artwork down here is we have our menstrual cycle, then our menstrual phase, then our follicular phase, then our ovulatory phase, and then the longest phase of all as women is the luteal phase. And my image got cut off over here, but this number, this last number in the line is 28 to indicate that the end of this cycle is on cycle day 28. So a couple things to notice here: estrogen and testosterone and progesterone. These are what we're talking about. So estrogen with the E, you can think of energy. So when you're on your period, all of your hormones are like at a baseline. You really don't have reproductive hormones on board to help you with like really outgoing moods and heavy duty workouts and a full 12-hour day at work or whatever it may be. Your reproductive hormones give you that up and go. And then after you have your period, which this is different for every woman. So I know that this is saying here that this is like what, 2. So this is saying that the period is 7 days. So 7 days is like on the long end of normal. Some women have a heavy bleed for 3 days, some for 4, some for 5. Everybody's different. As the bleeding slows down, you start to move into your follicular phase. So the period, the menstrual phase, is both the end of one cycle and the beginning of the next one. And then you move into your follicular phase. Your follicular phase is preparing for ovulation. So what your body's doing in your follicular phase is actually getting ready with follicle stimulating hormone to release an egg at the time of ovulation, which on average happens on cycle day 14. Or on average, it happens kind of smack dab in the middle of your cycle or halfway between menstruation and the very end of your luteal phase. So if you had a 32-day cycle, it's likely that you ovulate closer to cycle day 16. So keep that in mind. At your follicular phase, clearly you have estrogen quickly rising and it peaks on the day that you ovulate. And then you are intended to have a major dip in estrogen immediately following ovulation. And then that dip in estrogen really triggers the production of this progesterone to come on board as the dominant hormone through the remainder of your cycle in your luteal phase. But backing up here to the ovulatory phase, you'll notice that testosterone rises and peaks in the ovulatory phase. So around the time you ovulate is when you make the most testosterone for the whole entire month. Now that lasts in your system for about a week. You are actually fertile and in your ovulatory phase for maybe about 5 days, but the reality is that those ovulatory hormones, the higher estrogen and the higher testosterone, hang around for like a day or two after that and a day or two before that, meaning that this is the time of the month as a woman that you have the most capacity and ability to build muscle and burn fat. This is the time of the month that it's going to come really naturally, feel good, and bring the best results to work out a little bit harder. And then testosterone comes back down after ovulation, and it stays pretty low through the end of the cycle. And again, coming to the luteal phase, you'll notice that this is the longest phase of all of them. So we spend the most time as women in our reproductive years in this luteal phase, which is kind of like a fall time. So progesterone being the more dominant hormone here, progesterone is intended to have a calming effect. So estrogen, energy, progesterone is sometimes called the pregnancy hormone. It doesn't necessarily make you feel pregnant, but it has like a calming, nurturing effect. So just to touch briefly on hormonal imbalance, because as you hear me say that progesterone is meant to have a calming effect, meaning as we get towards the end of our cycle, closer to our period, we're actually naturally supposed to feel kind of like calm and introverted, and maybe you have PMS or like feel a little anxious or a little bit crazy towards the end of your cycle, which is really normal. I actually don't laugh at that at all. It's not normal, but it's really common because the American lifestyle doesn't really support stable hormones in women in their reproductive years. So PMS symptoms are really common, although not normal. So you may kind of laugh at me or not take me seriously that I say progesterone is meant to help you to stay calm and centered as you get towards the end of your cycle. I just want to touch briefly on hormonal imbalance and what can happen here to make it to where women do not experience the reality that I'm going to explain to you in this hour-long masterclass. So your liver is in charge of converting hormones. Once a hormone has done its job in your body, it's actually intended to be converted by the hormone from being fat soluble to being water soluble. And then it passes into the large intestine where it binds with the fiber in your diet. And you actually eliminate those old hormones from the body via a bowel movement. That's what's supposed to happen. But unfortunately, in America, we have like these chronic underfunctioning livers. And what happens is as you get to this peak day of ovulation, and estrogen is peaking and your body's making estrogen faster and higher than at any other time in the cycle. If the liver isn't working really, really well, you don't get this dip in estrogen, because what happens when the liver is not working well is it starts to like store toxins or distribute them back into the system, toxins and hormones, toxic and hormonal waste. The liver will start to defer those things back into the system to recirculate, or it will store them in fatty tissue to basically be dealt with later. And so then what happens is you have elevated estrogen throughout the remainder of the cycle. And when that happens, you don't get the trigger to create this elevated progesterone. And then you don't get the nice, like calm, grounding, centered feelings we're really meant to get as our cycle comes to a head. And instead we get elevated, energizing estrogen, and we maybe start to feel really anxious or really moody or have cycling thoughts or actually feel crazy, which I only say because that's something that I have dealt with in the past with my own hormonal imbalance. So I don't say it lightly. I say it because it's something that I have felt and several clients that I have worked with have also felt. So that's kind of like your introduction, these 4 phases in a nutshell. You have your menstrual phase, follicular phase, ovulatory phase, and luteal phase. Now that we've kind of covered these 3 hormones and what they are doing throughout. So I want to just, after we went through follicular, ovulatory, and luteal, I just want to reiterate that in the menstrual phase, all of these hormones that fluctuate and flow throughout the month come down to baseline. And so your period is really equivalent to like giving your computer a hard reset. It's like pushing that power button, shutting everything down and getting a refresh or a restart. So if you're ever having a bad month or things aren't really going how you hoped or you're not feeling good, you can always use your period as like an opportunity because everything's reset. Your appetite is reset. Your moods are reset. Your hormonal function and liver function is all kind of reset. So I'm going to come down now to this chart, and please still try to ignore all my words up here. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see if I can get rid of them here. So, and then I apologize about the quality of this. I tried to get creative with my visual here, and it turned into like copying this paper probably more times than it wanted to be copied, and I lost some quality. But as you can see, this is like a little line chart here with the temperatures. So this whole entire row here of 97s is to indicate 97 degrees. And then it goes 97.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 7, 8, 9, all the way up to 98 degrees, and then 98.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so this is a graph of, or a chart of a woman who took her basal body temperatures, so her morning waking temperatures, every single day of her cycle, kept track and put it on this line chart, which shows that women have a thermal shift every month in their cycle. So here we go. This is the menstrual phase. So down here, cycle day 1, cycle day 2, cycle day 3, all the way to this woman had a 30-day cycle. So like 2 days, maybe longer than average. But I use this graph because it's a really good visual of how we have a thermal shift. So once we have our period and the luteal phase comes to an end, this is the luteal phase, or these higher numbers are the luteal phase here. So once you have your period and your luteal phase comes to an end, as all those hormones come down to baseline, your body temperature always also drops down to your lowest basal body temperature. And then your body temperature runs cooler than average for the entirety of your follicular phase and your ovulatory phase. And then what happens here is the day after you have ovulated, your body temperature will rise. So once that egg has been released, that's going to trigger like all of these hormonal cascades and domino effects within the body, which tells the body the egg has been released, meaning if it were going to be fertilized, this is the time. So turn up the temperature, turn into a human incubator, basically, like that's the idea. And so your body temperature raises by about an entire degree the day after you've ovulated, and it stays high for the rest of your 28-day or whatever length cycle you have until you start your period again. And so all of these things are really important to kind of keep note of what I've been saying so far. When we look at this chart up here, the key takeaways are estrogen peaks between your follicular and ovulatory phases, and it's really important to support your liver in clearing that estrogen out as it peaks, so that as you transition into your luteal phase, you don't end up having PMS symptoms. Another key takeaway from this is that testosterone is at its highest level around the week of ovulation. So this is the time of the month to try to make gains with your fitness if you're trying to gain muscle or burn fat. And then key takeaways with this chart is that you have a lower body temperature during your follicular and your ovulatory and your menstrual phase. And that for the entire luteal phase, you have a higher body temperature. What this graph also shows is that your luteal phase is really about half of your entire cycle, meaning that the menstrual, follicular, and ovulatory phases happen kind of fast, like literally like bam, bam, bam. The other thing I want to highlight with these phases is I put these lines down here with the dots, and I color coded them. Down here is my little key, because these phases bleed together, no pun intended. It's not like one day your menstrual phase is over and the next day your follicular phase has ended. We all know that as you have your period, it tapers off, like you slowly have a lighter and lighter bleed until it fades away altogether. And we also know that as that bleed is fading off, we feel our energy rising back up. So all of these phases with the hormonal fluctuations tend to bleed together. So as your menstrual phase is ending, your follicular phase is beginning. And as you get towards the end of your follicular phase, your ovulatory phase is also beginning. So there's a couple days of overlap with all of these phases. And as your ovulatory phase is ending, your luteal phase is beginning. And I did these dots with the luteal phase, even going into the menstrual phase, because in talking with women about what they experience with their temperatures and their symptoms, I had learned that the hormones from the luteal phase can linger for the first day or two into your period, especially if you have like one day of some brown spotting before your actual period starts. That's kind of like a key that the hormones are, or a tip that the hormones are taking a minute to get to where they're supposed to be. So now I'm going to zoom out and kind of show this whole visual. And I want to let you guys know that I'm going to send this visual in email that I send this recorded replay with, so that you can keep it if you want and look back at it. But these two different charts really work together to help you to get a good understanding of what's going on. And now I'll talk about kind of what I wrote in here, like my little notes and my little lines, for lack of better word. I've tried to make these lines so that they would encompass the differences in different women. For example, some women have like a 4-day menstrual cycle, but some women are still spotting all the way until day 8. And so I don't enclose days 2 through 8 to say that everybody's menstrual phase is going to last until cycle day 8, but just to kind of leave the variable. So you have to be intuitive in kind of like taking on this information, because the fact remains that not every single one of us women is the same. We change, we're a little bit different just by a couple days or whatever it may be. And then again, I started the line for the follicular phase all the way here, like on cycle day 4, because for me, I have, for example, about 3 days of a heavier bleed, and then it starts to taper off and I can feel my energy rising. And that's a clue to me that estrogen and progesterone are both starting to come back up after having my menstrual phase. And so that's kind of my indicator that I'm still in my menstrual phase, but I'm starting up into my follicular phase. The ovulatory phase is the shortest, but I drew it out to go all the way to cycle day 18, because again, in listening to my own energy and talking to many, many clients who have learned this information and started tracking their cycles, that we can feel the lasting effect of testosterone in our system for a few days past ovulation. And you have some wiggle room to keep like working out a little bit harder and trying to get some goals crossed off when it comes to fitness. That's like your time to shine. And then the luteal phase truly starts like after you've ovulated. So for some women, it's going to start at cycle day 14. For some, it's going to start more around cycle day 16, but you're really going to feel the shift from luteal phase to, or I'm sorry, from ovulatory phase to luteal phase between days probably 16 and 20. And I can say that because I have a shortish cycle, usually 27 or 28 days. And I usually feel the energy from ovulation until, like I said, cycle day 18 or 19 or even 20. So let's talk about what I wrote down here, these little notes for each of the phases. So the red here This represents the menstrual phase. So just to introduce you, and then we're going to move on to some more in-depth handouts about each of these four phases. But just to introduce you, the qualities of your menstrual phase are resting, replenishing, slowing down, and taking a nap. The qualities of your follicular phase with rising estrogen and your body preparing for ovulation, your body preparing for the most fertile time of the month. The qualities are warming back up, cardio every day, lower carbs, some fasting. We're going to get more into that. Cooling foods and raw foods. Cooling foods and raw foods because your body temperature is low in your follicular and your ovulatory phase, and you actually want to eat to support that lower body temperature. If you're trying to stay cool, if your body is trying to stay closer to like 97.5 degrees and you're eating hot cooked food all day that raises your body temperature, your body is going to endure a small amount of stress trying to regulate that body temperature. So the idea is that you eat cooling foods like raw, light foods like salads and fruits and raw vegetables and leaner protein like chicken and fish, and things that are cooked lightly like steamed or just a really light roast, or like I said, raw. That type of food will help you to stay cool. Ovulatory phase, your body temperature is still lower. You're making testosterone. So as far as workouts go, take very few rest days. You have testosterone, take advantage of it. You can do intense workouts. This is the time of the month to get it done because you feel like it. Your hormones are all on your side for your moods to get it done. So it won't be hard. You won't experience that mental resistance like you do if you try to get it done when you're on your period. Still good to eat lowish carb, and it's still good to do some fasting if you are trying to lose some weight or get your liver back on board. If you're already like at a weight that you're happy with and you don't necessarily feel like your liver or your organs of elimination are working slowly or are sluggish, then you don't necessarily need to eat low carb or do fasting. You just want to focus on eating fresh and eating raw and eating cooling foods. And again, we're going to get into more detail with that. And then in your luteal phase, some of the qualities are, well, you have a higher body temperature. What that means is you actually have a higher thermal caloric burning rate, meaning you need more calories each day. You need like 200 to 300 calories more each day for the duration of your luteal phase. And in my experience, my appetite slowly increases all the way until the very end of my cycle. And so the solution to this is to eat regular meals and to take care of your blood sugar and to stop trying to eat low carb or do any amount of fasting. This is the time to stay on top of your hunger and not let yourself get to the point of hangry, because hangry equals really, really low blood sugar. And the effects last for hours and even days after you've done that. And then also you have that higher body temperature. So again, you want to support your body in staying warmer by eating warmer foods. If your body temperature is trying to stay warm because it thinks maybe there's a baby on board to keep warm. And I know that many of you, that's not what you're going for, but it's just good to talk about because it helps you to understand what the body is doing. The body stays warmer. So if your body's trying to be warm and you're just eating a ton of like smoothies and salads and raw vegetables and lemons and limes and oranges, you're going to create a little bit of stress by continuously cooling the body down and then the body having to warm itself back up. So higher body temperature, eat cooked and warming foods. So now I'm going to come over to where I actually go into more depth about each of these phases and give you a real recommendation to walk away with. So feel free to take a picture with your phone of this image on the computer so that you can look back at these notes, but at the very least have a pen and paper so that you can write down what the recommendations are. So your chart is still over here so that you can refer to it as we talk about the follicular phase. So the follicular phase is the phase following your menstrual phase. It lasts for about a week, 7 to 10 days, usually, like maybe a couple days more than a week. If you have a longer cycle, then it might be closer to 10 days. So that's this blue phase here when estrogen is on the rise, when you're preparing for ovulation. Down here, it's the phase where your body temperature is still lower. So as far as your estrogens, or I'm sorry, your hormones, like I just said, your estrogen is rising. So estrogen has the qualities of being energizing and extroverted, and the body is preparing for the release of an egg at ovulation. Qualities: warm up, start again, create new growth after rest, planting seeds, hope, refreshed energy, and initiating. So this phase is like springtime. You're going to think of this phase as your springtime. And thinking of all the qualities of springtime foods are often best cooked or eaten raw or lightly cooked. And because your body temperature is cooler, you naturally need less calories and you have a lower or even a suppressed appetite. And so if you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to support your liver, this is the time of the month that you can actually get away with restricting your calories a little bit and even a little bit of intermittent fasting. So you want to be supporting your liver. That's the main focus with food in your follicular and ovulatory phases, is support your liver, eat fresh, and don't bog your liver down. So my food recommendation, my specific food recommendation to try in your follicular phase, once your heavy bleeding has ended, is to try intermittent fasting with an eating window, fasting window ratio of either 8:16, 9:15, or 10:14. What that means is if you chose 8:16, you would have an eating window of 8 hours and you would have a fasting window of 16 hours. If you chose 9:15, then you would have an eating window of 9 hours and a fasting window of 15. And if you chose 10:14, then a 10-hour eating window and a 14-hour fasting window. The idea here is to play with these and see how you feel and pick the one that works the best for you. Because if you experience intense cravings or a desire to binge, or if you start feeling triggered to have like toxic diet mindset thoughts, then that's kind of your cue that you're doing too long of a fasting period. If you're getting cravings when doing like an 8-hour fasting window, then that might be an indicator that you're getting low blood sugar during your fasting window to the point that it's becoming detrimental to your adrenals. So play with those 3 options and see which one feels the best for you. My other recommendation with fasting is plan your eating window in the first half of the day versus the second half of the day. And I can't really say this enough. I'm going to start with breakfast and fuel your body during that most active and busy part of your day when you actually need the calories to burn. And then fast in the evening when you're already fueled and nourished and filled up with what you've needed for the day, versus being starving and having low blood sugar for the first half of the day while you're busy and working, and then eating in the second half of the day as your metabolism slows down. It makes more sense to eat in the morning if you are going to play with fasting. You can fast and eat low carb every day, only in the entirety of your follicular phase and your ovulatory phase. So it's going to look like 7 to 14 days total that you can play with this, depending on your phase. Also, reach for brassica veggies, raw greens, citrus fruits, and fiber, all to assist the liver and detoxification organs in eliminating estrogen. So basically in your follicular phase and your ovulatory phase, you need less calories, you have a lower body temperature, you can get away with some dieting in this part of your cycle. And it can really support your liver if you eat less carbs during this time. And the good thing about it is because of what your hormones and biology are doing, it's not detrimental to your body at all to do that in this phase. And it's going to come again, like I was saying earlier, without all of the mental resistance. It's going to feel natural and maybe even a little bit easy because your caloric needs and your body temperature are all supportive of doing that in this phase. Exercise in your follicular phase. As energy increases following menstruation, transition back into daily exercise with movement that warms your body from the core and gets your heart rate up. Think running, cycling, dance, cardio, vinyasa yoga. So again, thinking of springtime and thinking of how what's next in the ovulatory phase is having lots of testosterone on board. You're kind of warming yourself up for that in your follicular phase. So we're really zooming out and looking at big picture here as women with our 28-day cycle. Your follicular phase is almost like your warm-up week. You're going to warm yourself up with cardio every day that feels good and energizes you to prepare for pushing harder when you're in your ovulatory phase. So my exercise recommendation is, if you're writing this down, as soon as your heavy bleeding subsides, usually somewhere between days 3 and 7 of the new cycle, start increasing the intensity and duration of cardio workouts daily, taking only 1 to 2 rest days per week according to how you feel. And then I've put a little note down here to avoid any periods of fasting if you have an ongoing hormonal imbalance or adrenal fatigue. So if you have an ongoing hormonal imbalance and you're experiencing really long or really short cycles, or you're experiencing random or unpredictable bleeding, these are symptoms of an ongoing hormonal imbalance. Or if you're diagnosed with and dealing with something along the lines of PCOS or cysts or fibroids or estrogen dominance. And then adrenal fatigue really is a complicated thing to talk about. And so I don't mean to just throw it out there so lightheartedly, but that's just not the focus for this masterclass. If you've taken my past masterclasses, which are still visible online on YouTube, I talked more about adrenal fatigue and blood sugar and what those things look like. But for this masterclass, I'm going to kind of say, if you need to know more about those things, refer back to my last recorded masterclass or work privately with a coach like me who specializes in this type of thing, because you can do more harm than good if you're not in a place of good health and you start trying to do things like fast or eat low carb. So moving forward, I'm going to talk about the ovulatory phase. So this is the shorter phase of your cycle. It lasts 3 to 5 days, but like I said, you feel some of the lasting hormones from this phase for more like 6 or 7 days. This is your summertime. So this is like the time of blooming or blossoming. As far as hormones are concerned, estrogen is peaking and testosterone is at its highest point in your cycle. As far as the energetic qualities of this phase, you're going to feel the most open, extroverted, magnetic than you do at any other time. This is a good time for collaboration, communication, execution. You're going to feel more linear, goal-oriented. This is a good time to manifest or to bring to fruition things that you really want to do. So if you want to be someone who lifts weights or does power yoga, this is the time of the month to really focus on it. We ease off on pushing so hard during the other phases of the cycle. And then every time we come back to the ovulation phase, feels stronger than the last month is basically what ends up happening. So with food, the food and exercise, well, the food recommendations for the ovulatory phase are really similar to the food recommendations in the follicular phase. You want to continue to support your liver in clearing out estrogen. You can continue to do some fasting and some calorie restriction, and it's good to keep eating a raw food cooling diet during mostly raw food, like a raw food influenced diet in your ovulatory phase. Also, because this is the phase that you're hopefully working out the most, you want to make sure you're getting enough protein. So aim for between 15 and 30 grams of protein at each meal. And then for exercise, for about a week surrounding ovulation with estrogen peaking and testosterone on board, you can push your muscles and your limits to the max. This is the week to try to make gains, go faster, go further, and do it again the next day. Even if you're sore, your body can handle it at this time of the month. So think high intensity interval training, heavy weightlifting, CrossFit, power yoga, kickboxing. So my recommendation is for about a full week, do workouts that push you to your max. Find videos online, hit the gym, or work with a personal trainer if you have to. But to make gains, take advantage of peaking reproductive hormones to build muscle. Work hard and do it again the next day, even if you're sore. Try to take only one rest day this week. If you can't get in a full intense workout, do 2 shorter intense workouts strategically throughout your day. And you can also follow up these body strength workouts with cardio workouts and get a couple workouts in one day. This is your time to test your limits, have fun. And then again, my notes, avoid any periods of fasting if you have ongoing hormonal imbalance or adrenal fatigue. And then with adrenal fatigue, you also want to stop intense workouts after 20 minutes if you are experiencing that. And my advice is always never do intense workouts on an empty stomach. So I usually start to ramp up my workouts on about cycle day 12, and I keep them higher in intensity until about cycle day 18, 19, or 20, depending on how I'm feeling. So I have a whole week or even a couple days more than a week here, right in the center of my cycle, where I always push myself to my limit. But then the thing is, I start to back it off as I come into my luteal phase. And so what I've learned is that as women, we can be strong, but if we don't balance out our strength with ample rest and replenishment, we burn ourselves out really quickly and kind of end up working against ourselves. So moving past the ovulatory phase into the luteal phase, the longest phase of all, this is also kind of like your fall time or your autumn season. So this phase usually lasts about 10 to 14 days. With your hormones, estrogen and testosterone production quickly slow down and progesterone comes on board and is dominant. Estrogen does have one smaller rise about halfway through the luteal phase. The qualities of the luteal phase are harvest, finishing things, closing up projects, work, nurturing, warm, list focus, delegating, and home focus. So if you think about fall time, you've kind of like you planted your seeds, your crops all grew and they created whatever fruit they were going to. And then what a farmer does is they harvest everything. They do a lot of tedious, busy work to preserve that food for the winter, like canning or freeze drying or whatever it may be. So it's a longer season of busy work to get things set up and to get everything taken care of before the winter. This is the same idea with us as women. The idea in your luteal phase is to kind of like finish up whatever it is that you've had going on throughout the whole month or anything you've had on your to-do list, so that when you actually get to your period, you do have the opportunity to take a couple days off and rest. But as far as food and exercise goes, which is what we're talking about today, with a higher body temperature and a greater caloric need, you are more likely to experience blood sugar imbalance. Your luteal phase is not, excuse me, your luteal phase is not the time to fast or restrict yourself, as it would likely backfire with out of control cravings. Stay on top of regular meals and snacks, including healthy fat, protein, and whole grain carbohydrates that keep you satiated for longer periods of time. So my food recommendation in your luteal phase is to always eat breakfast within 90 minutes of waking. And then for the entire rest of the day, eat every 3 to 4 hours with moderate protein, healthy fat, and always include healthy carbohydrates in your luteal phase. This isn't the time to be low carb. Those healthy carbohydrates will help to keep your blood sugar stable and from plummeting, especially when they're paired with the healthy fat and the protein. Also, to assist your body temperature in staying warm, eat cooked warming foods. Think root vegetables and stews and roasts and all of those fall comfort foods that are so warming and yummy in the cooler months. And then as far as exercise goes, your estrogen and testosterone are waning. It's not the best time to push yourself to the max, but regular movement and exercise that maintains your progress is vital. So my recommendation for exercise in this luteal phase is actually, you kind of have two halves to your luteal phase. You can kind of see that when we look over here at this chart. For the first half of your luteal phase, you have a little rise in estrogen and progesterone. And then for the second half of your luteal phase, they dip down. So for about this first week, you can still do strong workouts. I'm not talking intense workouts. I'm just talking strong workouts that like warm up your body, maybe increase your heart rate and breathing a little, but not a lot. And it challenges you, but it doesn't push you to your max. So these are workouts that will maintain your muscle mass and your cardio tolerance, but they're not going to push you into a state of stress. And then during the second half of your luteal phase, you really want to listen to your body and listen to your energy and start to slow down on what you're doing and focus more on flexibility, stretching, flowing, staying grounded, and keeping your heart rate and your breathing under control. So mat workouts, Pilates, yoga, walking, gentle cycling, things that don't feel or sound exhausting to your energy. And then the menstrual phase, the final phase of one cycle and the beginning phase of the next. This is your winter. This is your time of rest and replenishment, or starting over, starting new. All hormones drop down to their lowest point in the cycle. The qualities of this phase are rest, nourish, letting go, slumber, replenish, inward focus, stillness, reflection, and self-analysis. One interesting thing I learned about your menstrual phase as a woman is that as you go throughout all of these hormonal fluctuations through the month, your left and your right brain kind of take turns being the more dominant thinking brain that's on board. But when you're on your period in your menstrual phase, this is the one time of the month that the two hemispheres of your brain are on board and communicating with each other more evenly and cohesively than any other time of the month. So this is actually a really good time for intuition, reflection, and self-analysis, as well as kind of just like analysis of your whole life. When you're on your period, your body is losing micronutrients, electrolytes, and minerals as you shed your uterine lining. So the idea with food is to replenish your body, to really fill your food with bodies that have so many micronutrients, minerals, and everything that your body is losing so that you can move into your next cycle robustly. So deeply nourishing, nutrient-rich foods like high-quality seafood, animal fat, and animal protein from really good sources. These things calm cramping and excess bleeding. Eat nutrient-dense meals according to your appetite, meaning it's okay if you aren't as careful to take such good care of your blood sugar as you do in your luteal phase, as long as you're listening to your body. Cooked foods are good for the first day of your bleed. And as the days progress, if you pay attention, you might start to notice your appetite becoming suppressed and fresh raw foods starting to sound yummier. My food recommendation is that this should be sushi week. It's okay if you don't like sushi, but seriously, this is like the perfect time of the month to have sushi because all of the seafood is so good for you. And then it's also got the seaweed, which has all of that iron and iodine, which you really need as a woman when you're losing those nutrients through the period. It's also a good mix of like cooked and raw sushi is. There's usually raw things and cooked things involved. And then the other aspect of it is you're losing electrolytes when you're on your period. And we almost always have sushi with either tamari or soy sauce or like a liquid aminos, that type of salty flavor, which is going to help to rehydrate your body. You need the salt in order to be hydrated. So wrote that here. This is also a good time to rehydrate and remineralize the body. So use quality sea salt to salt your foods or sprinkle Bragg's liquid aminos or tamari on your foods. As far as exercise, this week, do what feels good and allow yourself to rest and recover. Walking, gentle cycling, yin yoga, or gentle vinyasa flow might feel good, but otherwise take some days off. My recommendation is walk or stretch if you want, but naps count as workouts when you're on your period. And this really balances out how hard you work when you're in your ovulatory phase. And it helps with your mindset because when you're in your ovulatory phase and you're pushing so hard, you know in the back of your mind that there is a break, that there is rest coming up, that you have light at the end of your tunnel, that there's respite coming. And this makes so much more sense and is so much more intuitive than how so many of us women are used to living our lives. So, going to stop sharing my screen at this point, just talk to you. I'll share it again in a moment. So with all of that information, I just want to talk really briefly about a couple more things. I want to talk about masculine and feminine balance. Back before I went into all four of those phases, I briefly talked about how men have this 24-hour hormonal cycle and women have this 28-day hormonal cycle, which now you have learned quite a bit more about. And then I talked about how our whole entire like societal structure, or a lot of our societal structure, has been created around men's hormones. And what I can observe happening, in my opinion, from that is women feeling so out of tune with their own biology because it feels wrong compared to what's expected of us and what men do and what people in general do in our society. And so with this 24-hour testosterone cycle that men have, their daily life is the same. They generally feel the same every day, pretty linear, can have the same goals every single day, the same appetite, the same workout schedule every day, same sleep needs even are the same every day. And then their body temperature is also going to be mostly the same every day. Whereas women have this much more flowing and flexible hormone fluctuation that's expressed over many days. And so I see women trying so hard to be the same every day and to be able to do the same workouts every single day and to be able to work hard and show up fully, even when she's on her period and her biology is telling her that she feels exhausted, whatever it may be. And then I see hormonal imbalances coming out because when we don't really listen to our body, or when we don't trust listening to our body and we push through day after day, which then turns into month after month, which then turns into year after year, the stress falls on our adrenal glands, which are really at the foundation of your hormonal function, because your adrenal glands are in charge of creating the precursors to your estrogen and testosterone. And kind of what you just saw is that if you don't have ample levels of estrogen and testosterone at the right times in the month, then you don't get really good fat burning and really good muscle building opportunities in your month. And so then as women try so hard to be the same every single day, they stress their adrenals more and more until after months and years, sadly, the adrenals become unable to function how they were meant to. And then your reproductive hormone production tanks, and you become unable to make proper levels of those hormones that give you that up and go, that ability to burn fat and build muscle. And then women think, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do it? Why can't I work out hard every day? Why can't I stop having these cravings that cause me to eat 2 tubs of ice cream and sandwich or cereal late at night? And my experience is where that's coming from. And there's actually not anything wrong with us at all, except for the fact that we're out of tune with how our biology works and trying to be how we're not. And then our body kind of like backfires, or how we feel kind of backfires, because we're not honoring our feminine biology. So this is all such a crash course. I want to say that this is all like feels to me really watered down, because I normally take 6 months and I go in major depth with women about these systems that affect your hormones. So I go in depth with women about how to manage your blood sugar, how to support your adrenals, how to support your liver function in clearing out that estrogen every month so that you don't have symptoms. And then I go in depth with women about these 4 phases of their cycle and what it looks like to kind of implement cycle syncing in their own life. So I just want to throw that out there, that this is a crash course. This is like as much information as I can slam into an hour, and I'm leaving out a lot of really, really important information, but there's a lot more to this. Write this down if you aren't able to work with me as a coach, but you know that you are really motivated and you'll read books and put this stuff into action. Read Woman Code and In the Flow. Both are by Elisa Vitti. And also read Taking Charge of Your Fertility. Write that down as well, by Toni Weschler. And I will make sure that I put that in my email that has this recorded replay. The handouts that I shared my screen with you, I will also write the book recommendations in there so that you can look those up if you want to know more. And then I just also wanted to say that I'm only talking about really syncing your cycle with your food and your exercise today, but this is really everything. Once you learn about these 4 phases of your cycle, you can sync your creative process, the way that you run your business, or the way that you show up for work, the way that you engage in your relationships, when you plan girls' nights. All of these things will flow better in your life if you know when to strategically put them in your cycle. And then I wanted to just show you, because I wanted to give you something tangible, because it's like, this is all nice, but then how do I actually keep track in my everyday life of where the heck I'm at in my cycle? So I really recommend keeping a written calendar. I know most of us are used to just like jotting things in our phone and saving them on our calendar right there. But I've noticed that things don't stick in the brain the same way as when you write it down and you see it on paper. So this is the type of paper calendar that I recommend, is like a tabletop one that has lots of room. And I recommend you put it somewhere where it stays out, like in your kitchen or your dining room, somewhere where it's not going to bother you too much, but like a central location where you can check in with it every single morning. The idea is that you check in with this when you meal plan, when you're going to grocery shop, and when you're going to think about what workouts you're going to do, and you plan accordingly. So, like I said, cycle day 1 is the first day of your period. Cycle day 14 is an average woman's day of ovulation. And then an average woman has a 28-day cycle. So I usually have a 28-ish day cycle. So I go off of that and I keep it in my calendar like so. On the first day of my period, I write CD1 and I draw a little box around it so that it's really obvious to me. And then I look ahead and I project out my cycle day 14 and my cycle day 28 so that I can see on my calendar when I'm going to be